So if I have to ask quickly each one of you, what is one thing apart from TDD you have felt like strongly passionate about that has improved productivity, or you have seen productivity improvements in a significant manner, and you would like to recommend that? That would be really interesting for all of us to hear.
One principle which I found it really beneficial over the years is dry principle, I would say. But I hope you know what it is. Don't repeat yourself. I don't repeat myself. So, but what we have to understand here is that most of the times dry code doesn't get written. You have to make the code dry. So it's like you may have to allow duplicate at once, and then you find that things are going in the wrong direction, and you have to clean up through refactoring, essentially. So that's one principle of how to pick. I'll pick that.
Yeah. So whenever I look at a programmer who is using the mouse, I feel like slapping somebody. Yeah. So this is something that I'm really passionate about, and I really, I've stopped doing that, but I feel that as programmers we should be very, productive with the keyboard. Try not to use the mouse. Even with browsing, there are some awesome plugins that we can use for mouseless browsing as well. So, try to keep the mouse away. I think it takes away productivity.
Yeah, especially when we are working on IDE,
Yeah.
we should really remember all the shortcuts, which we use, and it really helps productivity boost in an enormous way. Just give it a try. Whenever you have to use mouse, try to spend couple of minutes, or if it takes 5 minutes, to find what is the keyboard shortcut.
So some of them, there are plugins with different IDs which allow you to, whenever you use the mouse, they'll prompt, okay, this is the shortcut for that. So one of the things that I've done practically is I use my right hand, but I've put the mouse on my left with the left hand. So it takes a little bit more time for me to use the mouse. So it really so I make the mouse more difficult.
Right,
so,
right.
Something that I've tried and it really works. So.
All right.
Second, I think that each one of us should be proficient in something like TextMate or a VI or a Emacs kind of editor. So not a full-blown editor, but a console-based editor. That really helps. So that allows us to log onto a server and not complain about, okay, I don't have my ID, therefore I'm feeling lost, saving file, instead of saving file, I've deleted file, things like that. So, because when I've seen that some very good programmers, when they move onto the server to do some quick fix, they feel lost. So, another
Only
thing.
two things.
Yeah. So, I feel that one should be really proficient, almost as proficient with their main ID, like IntelliJ or IntelliJ IDEA or Eclipse, as with a console-based editor like VI, Emacs, TextMate. Then, it's a mindset thing, like you were talking about Drive, which is more of a principle. So being ruthless about our own code, like refactoring it, not getting attached to what we have written. In fact, if we think that we have written the best, we should keep looking back at the code that we have written 6 months back, and if we don't feel that it stinks, that I see that as a sign that we have not learned much during last 6 months. As in, we should feel that, okay, no, I could do it better. This is what I've written. Otherwise, if we are not able to think of a way of doing it better, that probably is a signal that we have not learned many new things. So ruthless refactoring is a mindset that we should all have, and that will help us being more productive. That's what I feel. Thank you.
So apart from TDD, if I have to see something, so my opinion again, there is bit different. TDD does not make you more productive. At first, you are in fact, you feel that you are slowed down because of that. Just think in terms of maintainability. When you have to come back to that code after 6 months, it is really then you start to see the effectiveness of that. Now, just not that TDD as a testing itself, but what do you write in assertions and what your description of the test, they are also very important equally. But if we have to completely skip the testing part, what I would say is that, and it is on the same lines, that to be more productive, you have to master your tools. For example, choose one tool. For example, like IntelliJ IDEA, and I'm not forcing that on anyone, but the thing is that you should start learning how to use that effectively. Second, start using Unix or Linux-based systems more and more. Script all the small things that you can. You don't have to write a next big thing. You just automate how you clean your desktop, how you do things, how do you move your files around, how you tail and grep on a log, how you find phone numbers in some text files. Prefer text files more than anything. Don't write Word docs and PowerPoint and Excel and this and that. Markdown is ultimate format that you'll ever need to write blog posts or do whatever documentation. Always write a README file. Maintain your dot files. How many of you maintain dot files? Cool. Have your dot file repo, and last advice, that open it up. Open everything. Because the worst thing that we do is to keep things with ourselves. And we have fear that I write bad code. I still write bad code, and I know that it is available to everyone and everyone will comment on that. Trust me, no one does. Nobody cares about you. There is ton of code online already that is available for everyone to watch. Nobody is going to see your code. But if one guy who issues a pull request to your project, you will feel good about it. That, oh, someone has actually used my project somewhere in production. And trust me, even if it is, he say, no one, just think of yourself. Will you say someone else's code and just say that, oh man, you suck? You won't say. You will say in a subtle way. Same thing people do to you also. So don't worry about that too much. Just open it up. That's all.
Venkat, you would like to add something?
Really interesting. So I'll actually say there is a principle, the practice that I use actually more than TDD, not just in addition to it. And this is something I learned fairly early on in my career, and it's opened my eyes. And that's going to be code reviews. And even today, I practice code reviews quite extensively. And just to share with you an experience, I was on a project. We were about 15 different people working on the project. And one of the people that I was working with, a supervisor at the time, said, we're going to do code reviews on every single line of code that ever gets written. It doesn't matter who the person writing the code is. You don't have to be a senior developer or a junior developer. You write code, it gets reviewed by somebody else. And we were a small team of people at the time, and within this bigger project. And we would spend our time reviewing each other's code. And while we did this, the rest of the team would literally be laughing at us. They would look at us and say, look at these guys, rather than getting the work done, rather than writing the code, they're wasting their time reviewing the code. Well, once that particular iteration or release was over, literally the number of bugs in the entire application was in thousands. The number of bugs in the part that we wrote, where we had done code review, was, you could count them with number of fingers in your single hand. And while the rest of the team was spending the next 6 months fixing bugs, we had moved on to implement several other features for the next version. And I was convinced at that time. And so to me, code reviews are extremely important. However, anytime you mention code reviews, people really get angry, right? They don't want to do code reviews. You go to a company and you say, I want to do code review. The boss says, code review? Is that what you guys do? Like on a Thursday afternoon, everybody gets into a room, you project the code on the monitor, and everybody starts talking? That's the code review? It's like, yeah. Well, no code reviews for you. Like, why? Because, Joe says, look, I don't want to be wasting my time looking at the stinking code this other person wrote. I've got other better things to do, right? In the meantime, the guy who wrote the code says, I don't want to get criticized in that room. I'm going to call in sick that day. In the meantime, the boss says, oh, code review. The last time you guys did it, there was a fight. We had to call the cops and one guy quit. No more code review for you, right? So it becomes extremely political. Nobody wants to do code review. But it's to the contrary. The way that we do code reviews is we call it tactical code reviews. So I write a small task. As soon as I'm done with the task, you are responsible to do the review of that code. Just you, that's it. The next task I work on, he reviews it. The third task I work on, he reviews it. And then I rotate it among these three people. I don't invite a team and hold a meeting, right? It's just a tactical code review. Likewise, the code he writes, I review it this time, the code he writes next time, you review it the next time, and then so we rotate it. And also we have this policy where you cannot say I'm too busy to review code. Well, somebody writes code, it's part of your responsibility to review the code. And if you're too busy to review code, well, quit writing other code and take time to review other people's code. And if you want to really take it to the next level, well, you can do pair programming. And if you do pair programming, you have an instant active review of the code right then. But if you do this, I recommend you don't pair with the same person for a long time. We rotate pairs on a daily basis. If I pair with them today, I pair with you tomorrow. Then we don't get into this pattern where two people get together and write the crappy code. You are able to really improve the quality of code over time, right? And that can be another way. So if you ask me if there is one practice that I follow, anytime I bring in projects to implement, that's one practice we follow. Either we do pair programming or where we are way too remote in different time zones, every single line of code that one person writes, another person reviews it. And that has a huge impact on so many levels. It removes so many bugs even before the code goes into production because somebody else who is reviewing it. But be also very careful. Don't go bring somebody who doesn't write code and tell them they have to review your code. That's dangerous. There's a name for it. It's called priesthood-based code review. These are priests. They have a big beard. They say, when I used to write code 20 years ago, like, no. Are you working on this project? No, I don't write code anymore. Then don't review the code, right? Well, it should be people who are writing code actively on your project who should be reviewing code. Then there's a context, there's a perspective, and then the number of bugs gets lowered. The other benefit is, you talked about refactoring, which is extremely important. Somebody looks at this code and says, hey, look, this is 70 lines of code. It failed single responsibility principle. You got to break it up. Or here is so much duplication, we can roll it up. How many times have you written code and somebody looks at the code and says, I don't get it? If you want to make code readable, there's only one way to make code readable. Read it. If nobody has ever read your code, and you say my code is readable, what does that mean? Nobody has ever read it, right? There's no human who has survived reading your code, right? Then they cannot claim it's readable, right? So readability comes from reading the code actively. And how do you name variables? How many times have you seen variables called P, Q? Do you do this to your children? Son, what's your name? P? Is it your initial? No, that's my full name. Why did you have that name? Because my dad is a programmer? Right? You don't do that, right? You give nice names to your children. Then why do you do that to your variables? If somebody else reviews your code, they're like, okay, P? Really? What is that for? Why don't you enlighten me, right? The other day I was reviewing some code. It said RQS. I'm like, okay. Interesting. I don't have a clue what RQS is, but the guy who wrote it knows it, right? How many times you look at this code and you're like, I don't know what this is doing, right? So we work in a field called software archaeology, right? You look at this and say, when this guy wrote this code, he knew what this is. Why don't you go ask him? He's dead, right? And we are trying to investigate, try to find. We shouldn't be in software archaeology, right? So have code reviews. I love code reviews. And do that through either pairing or do that through, tactical code reviews.